Alrighty. Okay, welcome everybody to Tuesday Talks. My name is Gloria, and I am one of the co-founders for Initial View. I think some of you know who I am because you've been tuning in, and some of you, this is your first time. Okay, welcome everybody into Tuesday Talks. And so welcome, and here at Tuesday Talks, we really want to give you good information about the application process and answer lots of questions. And today I am very, very honored to have some special guests. These are friends of mine. I've actually traveled with them and I have had lots of sessions with them. I am sure we are all thinking back about times where we were traipsing around China, and we're missing that, but we're glad we're still able to do this kind of session and say hello to everybody. If you are new to Tuesday Talks, we play this game and it's called Spot Mr. View. We will be playing it today. Spot Mr. View, there will be in my window at some point a special guest, and you will need to screenshot that special guest and email it to us, and you'll have a chance to win $1,000. And last week we played and we had our first winner. And so we just want to say congratulations to Kaichi from Hefei number 8 High School. So yay, congratulations, Kaichi. I don't know if you're here today, but we're super excited that you won. And we're looking forward to giving out one more of these later on this week. So make sure you pay attention. It's going to look something like this. So you see the screenshot, you will see somebody in my window. So pay attention, okay? Don't forget, you can email to contact@initialview.com. All righty. Okay, just a few nuts and bolts. If you need Chinese, 如果你需要中文的就中文翻译, you can go to 小儿通 and you can scan this code. And I believe today we should be having some Korean support as well. So if you need Korean language support, go ahead and go to our YouTube channel. Everything should be streaming as normal, hopefully. Please let me know, colleagues, if you're not streaming. Great, fantastic. So also special thanks. We could not be doing Tuesday Talks the way that we've been doing them without the support of all these high schools. And so we just want to take a minute. I want to take a minute to say thank you to all these high schools who have volunteered to be a sponsor school this year for Tuesday Talks. This is our third year of Tuesday Talks. I kind of can't believe it. And I'm like super grateful that generations of students are coming through and listening to these talks and hopefully getting transparent information that's not always available for everybody. So once again, thank you to all of the counselors who are helping us get the word out. And we hope to see more of your students come through. All right. I am seeing that people are not seeing my screen well. Is that right? I hope people can. Panelists, can you guys see my screen okay? All right, well, I might just stop the share for a second and try it again. Okay, I'm gonna stop and share again. And while I do that, actually, why don't we go ahead and have our guests introduce themselves? So, Allison, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick things off. Hello, everyone. My name is Allie Duke, and I'm a Senior Assistant Director of Admission and work on the international team at Dartmouth College, where I have been for the past 5 years. Dartmouth College is a small rural liberal arts college located in Hanover, New Hampshire, which is in the very far northeast corner of the US. And I'm really excited and happy to be here with you all today. Maybe I'll kick it over to Saul. We'll go in alphabetical order.
Thanks, Allie. Hi, everyone. My name is Solomon Enos. Pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm coming to you from Durham, North Carolina. I am an admissions officer at Duke University, and Duke is in the state of North Carolina, in the American Southeast. So we're in the southeast portion of the United States, and I'm so happy to be here joined by so many of my beautiful colleagues. I'll kick it over to Chrissy next.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Christy Callahan, and I'm coming to you from Chicago, Illinois, right in the heartland of the United States. I'm representing Northwestern University, where I've worked for almost 10 years now. And we are just north of the city of Chicago, and we have a campus and locations in the city of Chicago, but we're nestled in the town of Evanston. We have 6 colleges and schools where we let you kind of study whatever you're interested in during those 4 years that you're on our campus. We work hard and we play hard and we have a lot of fun at Northwestern, and it's a pleasure to just have this chat with you about applying. We know that this is a pretty ambiguous and stressful process, but we hope that we can add just some layers of relief and some clarity today, and that's what we're here. We're human to human. Your application is definitely a lot of pieces, but at the end of the day, it's one of us reading one of your applications. So thank you for having us today, Flora. And I'll kick it over to Shane.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Shane McGuire. I'm from Vanderbilt University, right in the heart of Nashville, Tennessee, in the southeast part of the United States, Medium Research University. Been at Vanderbilt for, I think, 8 years now, and excited to join you all today. So thanks for being here.
All righty. We are going to hope that the screen clears up for a lot of you. Some of you are saying that it's unclear, but that was like really small words. So hopefully this is not small words and we're going to get started. But the good news is that today's talk is going to be a lot of talking and not that many slides, because we really want to have a real conversation. And so that's a reminder to all of you. I'm so glad that you guys are using the chat already. If you have questions, I'd love for you to use the Q&A box, because that will help me see what the actual questions are versus some comments, which I love. I love the comments as well. But if I can see the questions in the Q&A box, that would be great. And you can go ahead and start asking them now, because this whole presentation or session is going to be a conversation. And I know many of you have heard words like holistic review. And if you're new to the application process, especially the application process to US colleges and universities, this is a really important concept that you need to know about. It is also a very hard concept to kind of grasp for a lot, especially for you all coming from countries that have kind of metrics-based only college application processes. So, so we're going to talk about holistic review, and I think the definition will sort of start coming out as we talk. And Tuesday Talks are going to get into the nitty gritty, but we're going to kind of have a high level conversation about what holistic review is. So, Solomon, do you want to start us off with this?
Yeah, thanks, Gloria. So we'll start off with the slide. Myth or fact, the academic profile of a student is the most important part of the application process. And, the academic profile is very important. So it is a fact, but there is so much more to that than just, yes, that's a fact. So especially when you talk about highly selective, hyper-selective admissions, as all of us are representing institutions that are very, very selective. And so, of course, we want to make sure that if you come to any of our institutions, that you are ready for the rigor that our faculty will provide to you. We hope that you're looking forward to that rigor in the classroom. And the way that we'll make sure that you are ready for that is to look at your academic profile. And so what does the academic profile entail? I mean, it certainly includes your transcript. It includes your standardized testing if you decide to submit that. But the reality is, when you're submitting your application to schools that have a 5, 6, 7+% admission rate, we have that luxury of being able to choose not only students that have a strong academic profile, but add so much more to our community. And so, at some point we ask the question, in the beginning of admissions committees, what is this student competitive for admission? And by and large, because we are attracting some of the strongest applicants around the world, the answer is an easy yes. And so we often have to go beyond that question to find the students that we admit. So we're finding the most compelling applicants to admit among a very, very, very large applicant pool, a very, very large competitive applicant pool. And so that is the difference. When it comes to holistic admissions, the academic profile is just one of many parts of the application. And when you think of holistic admissions, I always think of the word whole. So we want to make sure that if you, before we render a final admissions decision, that we look at many, many pieces of parts of your application before making a final admissions decision. We're going to really speak more about the academic profile piece first. And so I'm going to actually turn it over to my colleague, Christy, to keep us going.
Great, thank you, Saul. So that's a starting point, and I really want you to just let that piece soak in, right? This slide represents what we see when you submit your application. So when we're actually reviewing your application, we wanted to show you a little bit of a glimpse of what we're viewing on our side. So this is going to be a little bit blunt and a little bit real talk, as we called it in the preparations for this meeting. But you can see there's a lot of really strong scores on this sheet. So you don't, I see some comments coming up that it's hard to see the particulars, but what I'm trying to pull off by this is not necessarily for you to see each and every number on this sheet. It's really to see the overall impressive and quantitative strength that most of the students that apply to our institutions have. So you can see a lot of, I'll call attention to it, over on the left-hand side, the testing. So you can see the SAT and SAT subject test. That's really a quick glance. We spend a very fraction of a second looking at that number because it's just one quantitative item. As you know, many of our institutions are test optional, and that is to benefit the applicant pool. It's actually there for your benefit as an option because we want you to have less of the obstacles and the challenges in securing access to those exams, which is kind of the supply of the exams and locations and testing sites around the world have decreased. And we saw that as an obstacle for the students. So that's just a quick checkpoint we spend a fraction of a second looking at. And then we move on to make sure we see the bigger piece of this puzzle here, which is the 4 years of academic work that you've put in at your high school or secondary school institution. And so we see all the different types of courses. These are categorized by the different subject area. We can see the years, the continuation of success. We can see any ups and downs, and that's where we spend a lot of our time looking, right? But you can see on this chart that there's not a whole lot of concerns. This student is academically successful. They are just strengthening each year in each of their subjects, as well as seeing that they have an advanced level of rigor in their curriculum. So they're taking the most rigorous curriculum available to them. As you see, many of them have APs by the end of their senior year. That's the curriculum that this student has, which means that that makes sense that this student would be taking AP subject tests, which are off to the side as well. So if we don't see those AP subject tests on the transcript, or if we don't see the AP courses on the transcripts, then we really have no reason to look for the AP subject test because that's not the curriculum that that student is enrolled in, right? So this correlates in that regard, but we also want to kind of see that those exams are related to the courses that they've taken, or if there is additional AP subject tests, that it's something that the student is trying to show us and tell us that maybe wasn't available to them in their high school setting, but just the sheer quantity is a little overwhelming, right? It means that the student has put in a lot of work in the classroom, as we can see where we spend the majority of our time in the center of the screen. Over on the right-hand screen side of the screen, if you do the AP subject test and you just keep adding to that list, it kind of diminishes the value. And if you have all of those courses or all those tests, but they're not on your transcript, then it just shows that you're doing a lot of time testing. You're not taking a lot of time maybe in some of the other areas that we're going to talk about next. So this is just to introduce the topic that this student has fabulous scores across the board. They're doing everything they can in their high school setting. They're not going necessarily beyond their high school setting to take too many extra tests. And that's really important for us to get across today. There's a lot of myths out there about testing, and we really want you to know that at the vast majority of our applicant pool, that we are so privileged to represent institutions that have students that are very qualified, right? And so this piece is really just a checkbox in a way. It is demonstrating a lot of hard work and endurance and perseverance on your part as an academic, but we know that students that are attending Initial View Tuesday Talks and students that are having access to wonderful educations in their secondary schools have this as a primary focus. So we have to go beyond that to see what's next. So again, we just want you to keep in mind that the transcript is the most dominant piece, and the tests are optional, they're on the peripheral. And it really kind of just counts as like a fraction of the moment. Is there anything to add that you wanted to take away from this slide, guys?
I just wanted to jump in here and just say, like, I think we're getting distracted a little bit by the actual screenshot. So I might actually even move on to the next slide, but we're still kind of talking about this. Just because I don't want people to kind of get caught up on like, what numbers are there? Yeah, and so I want to take a step back so that everyone's just kind of listening again about what you actually said, as opposed to kind of like trying to determine how many AP subject tests that student took.
No, that's the point.
I think that's the conversation I want to have here, because there are many students and families who kind of come in thinking like, okay, what kind of classes am I supposed to take? And how many of them am I supposed to take? And if my school doesn't have those classes, do I need to take more and more? And like, this is the kind of questions that are coming up. So I'd appreciate like if we can kind of take our eyes off of that screenshot for a minute and talk about that. So I don't know if, I know Allie, you were going to jump in, but if you all could weigh in a little bit of how do we approach kind of academic profile, given that it's something that the transcript being so important in understanding a student's ability to be successful on campus. What are some thoughts that come from that when I say like, how many classes am I supposed to take? And, do I need to take extra?
Yeah, and I'm happy to jump in for just a second because Gloria, I think that feeds in really well to the point that I was going to bring up. On the last slide, it was probably very challenging to see, but there was a grading scale. And so I just want to sort of open the conversation around context as well, because as we do venture into this more humanistic part of the admissions process, we are looking at every single student's individual context. So our job is not to compare apples with oranges. It's not to say, well, this student's taking IB and this student's taking AP, so who's working harder, right? That is not our job. We are looking at how you have performed within the opportunities that are available to you. Do you live in a rural setting or are you in a city? Are you the first in your family to attend college? All of these contextual pieces are really helpful for us to understand your academic performance. So just be reassured that even though we are seeing a lot of really big, strong, flashy numbers, we are looking at how that sort of compares in your individual context. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I think as many times as we do these presentations, everyone still thinks that that last slide is the most important piece. We can't say it enough. I can guarantee you with 100% certainty, I have never once gone running into my dean's office saying, oh my gosh, look at this list of AP 5s. Like, that is not why I get out of bed and do this job in the morning, right? We admit people, not statistics. I know certainly at Dartmouth, and I'd venture to say this is probably true for the rest of my colleagues, we could fill our classes and not have enough space for all of the students who have perfect test scores or perfect transcripts. There is just so much more to this process. So I think Shane is going to talk to us a little bit more about this slide that we're on here, but I just can't sort of reinforce what Christy and Gloria have said enough, that the academics are not everything.
Oh, thanks, Allie. And I was just going to add a quick note too, that we don't favor one curriculum over another as well. I know they touched on sort of the context there, but I think there's this idea among students that like, well, maybe the national curriculum is better than AP, or I've got to do AP over IB. That is not at all the case. Again, we're looking to see that you are making the most of the opportunities at your high school. And I know Christy touched on this too. You saw all of those AP tests on the side there, but we don't expect you to take all those tests. And also, if you're not in an AP curriculum, we definitely don't expect you to take those tests. So just keep that in mind. You are more than just sort of test scores and sort of an academic record. And that kind of leads nicely into, we've talked about sort of this academic foundation, but I think the left part of the slide actually sums up things very, very well in terms of what we see. And many times when we're reading an application, it is kind of like putting together a puzzle. We are looking at these different pieces that we get from you, whether we get a test score or we get a transcript, we get supplements, essays, recommendation letters, information from your school counselor, from teachers, information about your high school, optional recommendations that other folks may send in. We're getting all this information about you that we are sort of reading through and really trying to understand who you are. We're trying to sort of put together your story, understand what you're doing in your high school, what you're doing in your community, really trying to sort of pull all these pieces together to understand you. So this is what we get, sort of the left side of this screen. And this is what we spend, 4 or 5 months or longer in our offices reading these and understanding who you are as a student. I think all of us are very excited that we are very near the end of that process for this cycle. The other side of this, though, is really what we're getting out of that application, the things that we're trying to look for as we read these different parts of your application. We're looking for some of these intangibles, and I refer to them as intangibles, but these are kind of the things that we hope to learn about you, that we might see as being a good fit for our particular community. And I'm not going to kind of read through this entire list, and others can chime in here with examples that you have. But, as we look at your academic record, it's more than just you doing well in the classroom. We're looking for those students that are going to contribute to the conversations, that are going to sort of bring that intellectual vibe, that intellectual curiosity to our classroom. I'm thinking about, I work at a research university. It's a huge part of what we do, scholarship, research, a big thing that's going on campus. We want students that are going to come in and bring that intellectual curiosity, that want to sort of contribute to what's going on at our particular institution. All of us are working to sort of shape communities, and we're thinking about the impact that students are going to have on our campus, the engagement they're going to have. It's not just enough to show up and contribute in the classroom. We also want to have students that are contributing and making impact outside the classroom, that are taking on leadership roles. And so that's a lot of times when we're looking at your extracurricular activities, the things that you're doing, the things that you are passionate about, that gives us an idea, okay, if you're passionate about these things, if this is what you're doing now, this is likely how you might contribute to our communities on campus. We might be looking for certain talents as we think about athletics, as we think about music or art or theater, or you name it, lots of different things that could be there. And I'll skip down to this last part too, because I really like sort of this fit piece. As you're thinking about it on your side of things, right? You're looking for an institution that is the right fit for you. But also, as we're looking at your application and we're reading through these different parts, we're starting to envision how you could fit in our community. How could you contribute to this capacity on campus? How are you going to make an impact here? We're starting to visualize, are you a good fit for what we have to offer you as a university? And we also have values that we're thinking about as well. I always encourage students, if you're trying to figure out, is an institution the right fit for me, or am I starting to sort of match with that institution? All of us have these sort of community creeds out there, which is basically how we have chosen to define ourselves. And I always encourage students to sort of look at those things and say, are those sort of resonating with me? Can I see myself sort of matching some of those values? Because again, as we're reading your application and doing that overview, we're looking to see that you sort of match some of those characteristics and values. So really, this is what we're trying to get out of. When we look at these different pieces on the left, these are a few of the things that we're trying to look for as we shape our communities. And I'll stop there, see if others have examples that you want to sort of chime in with.
I was just going to do.
Oh, go ahead, Christine.
I was just going to do a small play on words here with the intangibles. The vast majority of our application process in the United States, and specifically at our highly selective institutions, is trying to make that whole list of intangibles tangible in your application process. So we are looking for ways to actually feel out that list and those things that are important to our institution. So just know that is what the vast majority of our review, as well as the documentation that we're asking you to submit, is about.
Thanks, Christy. I also just wanted to add, I think oftentimes we see, or students or parents see these lists of things that we're looking for, and they're like, okay, we have to do, I as a student, or my student has to do like everything, all of these things in order to be, a compelling applicant to Dartmouth or Vanderbilt or Northwestern. And there's a difference between a well-rounded student and I think a lot of folks think, I need to be good at everything in order to be competitive or compelling for admission to these schools. And the answer is, we have a lot of well-rounded students, but we also have a lot of what we call well-lopsided students, a lot of angular students who bring a talent, a point of excellence. That's something that we use in our admissions committees to making a well-rounded class. And I think that's what we're trying to do. We're looking to craft a class that has students that bring so many different qualities that makes it a strong class. So maybe, a student might have more than one point of excellence. Maybe a student just has one, and it's amazing, but you don't have to do all of the intangibles. You have to have all of the intangibles plus the things on the left, or the kind of the quantitative things in order to be admitted to one of our schools. I think, you could be good at one or two things and have, the academic preparation and still be admitted.
So I'm gonna go ahead and dive into some of these questions because I think they're completely related. And I think we are kind of still like, we did kind of bring up the academic profile and we're kind of stuck in their academic profile. Although I think it is a very good question that everyone's asking, because if the transcript doesn't have strong grades, that is a deal breaker, right? Is that a deal breaker?
Our job as admission officers, which is lost completely in the hype and the myths out there, is just to make sure you're going to be successful. So when we're talking about something like TOEFL or IELTS or English proficiency, that's just whatever institutionally we decide is what you need to be successful in our classroom, so that we know that when we place you in a class, you won't struggle, right? And so that varies by institution, because there's different assistance methods, there's different preparation courses, depending on the institutions that you come to. There's difference in the level of rigor of each course that you're going to enter as a first-year student, depending on the institution. So that's all that is supposed to do, is to make sure you're going to be successful. Again, it's a checkbox. That whole first slide is just a checkbox. We're not going to dissect whether one student has 10 points more or 20 points more or whatever. Those are all just very tiny kind of dial points. But we don't have, at the caliber of institutions we represent, we have to go beyond that. And that's why I said we spend like a very minimal amount of time on those academics, because we have a lot of students that can meet that. So we have to go beyond that. And that's where we get into this entire piece and building the class, as Solomon said. We're trying to bring in the class, and that class differs every year, right? So the applicants to our institutions differ every year. So that's why highly selective, hyper-selective, holistic admission is so difficult to define. And I know that's frustrating as a student, but no, those are just benchmarks to make sure that you're going to be successful. And at our institutions, those benchmarks aren't specific numbers, which I know is frustrating.
Yeah, thank you for that. And there are questions about like, what is after grades, after academic profile, what is most important? And I just wanted to point out real quick, when we were thinking about the image to put for holistic components of holistic review, there are a lot of things out there like a pie, and and I specifically went away from the pie chart because I was worried that people would be like, oh, this part of the pie is bigger than this part of the pie. And the reason why I like the puzzle a little bit is because puzzle pieces can be different sizes. These just happen to be the same size, but actually puzzle pieces can be different sizes. But even the smallest puzzle piece, if it's missing in a puzzle, it actually makes the picture not clear. And so I like the puzzle because I'm like, every piece is actually important in its own way. It is difficult to weigh, like this puzzle piece, even though it's tiny, is like not going to impact the decision. Whereas this giant piece is going to, there's just different ways to think about the puzzle. So I want to kind of put that out there so that people kind of remember, because I think it is the wrong question to be like, what's more important here? That is the whole concept of holistic review. It's a whole thing. It's not, it's not just like percentages. And that's difficult to understand. And that's why we keep having these sessions. So, but I will kind of ask this question about, because I think, we put a list of intangibles and now everybody's going to be like, oh, can I show all of these things? And what you said was right in that you don't necessarily have to have all of these things. These are just some of the qualities that you're looking for when somebody is putting together their activity list, when somebody is when somebody is providing a recommendation letter. So I wanted to ask, because there's always this question of like, what type of activity should I be doing to showcase this intangible? So I wanted to ask the question, like, is there a special activity that is more often than not compelling? Or is there any topic that is unique?
I'm happy to start this because I love this question. I get it a lot. People want to know, and I think people assume that we have a checklist of sort of like activities that we might expect from every student that we're sort of going through. Like, okay, have they done a service project? Have they led a club at their school? Have they played a sport? Something along those lines. I can assure you that's another myth out there. We do not have a checklist of activities that we expect from students. Whenever students ask me about activities or interests, I always say, pursue the things that you love and are passionate about. And the reason we say that is because if you're really truly passionate about it, you're truly interested in it, you're likely going to spend more time doing it. You're going to put, you're going to take on leadership roles. You're going to take on responsibility. You're going to be looking for ways to make an impact in that space. And all of those things, that sort of depth of involvement, that depth of engagement, that is really going to stand out when we look at that application. So as you think about your activities, don't worry about what we're looking for, what we expect in terms of activities. Think about the things that you truly love and enjoy, and make sure that comes through your application. As Saul sort of touched on, yes, we have a lot of well-rounded students who have done a lot of different things, but we also have others that are well-angled, and either one can stand out. Again, don't think about sort of crafting this perfect resume. Craft a resume that really embodies the things that you love and enjoy.
And just to sort of add to Shane's point, and this is sort of one of my pieces of advice that I think we'll see on the next slide, is the items that you are most passionate about and that you do enjoy the most should be featured most prominently in your application. When I go into an extracurricular list, I am not looking for what is going to impress me. I'm looking for what matters to you. So I think a lot of students think that they need to put at the top of that list what they think I want to see. And that is not the case. It should be what matters the most to you. And I think that some of these sort of intangibles are tough. As Christy mentioned, I think it can be frustrating. There's no sort of, 2 years in student council plus 3 years of sports plus 2, service projects equals admission. Like, you can't go on Vanderbilt's website and say, well, my sense of humor is within the middle 50% of sense of humor that they admit, or my curiosity quotient is top 75% at Duke. Like, we get it. It can be frustrating, but sort of going to something else on this page here, we want you to be authentic. We just want to get to know who you are. When we get your application, it's a piece of paper, right? It's on our computer screen, but it's a piece of paper. But we need to envision when you show up on our campus in the fall, who you're going to be as a real live human being. You're not going to be a piece of paper anymore, right? We want to know how you are going to fit into our community and what you are going to bring. So we really are focusing on these sort of intangibles that, like Christy said, can be tricky to think about, but are so important.
I'm going to put something out there just as a discussion point. We've talked about how, to be authentic and to be yourself. And I think there are some families here on this call who have very young children still thinking about kind of how to prepare the way. And there's always this question of like watching all around you. Do I do the things that most successful people do? Or do I go out on my own and do something that's like completely crazy and unique and, take a risk? And I just want to kind of have a point of discussion. Like, does that, does that play into your decision making? Are you like reading and thinking like, oh, I've never seen someone parachute out of, I don't know, I don't know what it is, but something like that's a little bit not like Model UN in debate. I mean, what is your thought process when you're kind of thinking, when you're reading about a student's, interests?
I think this gets to the point that's, beyond what's on the piece of paper. But I think is one of the most challenging things I see that families and parents and students themselves struggle with, which is you have, in order to be authentic or to have these things that mean something to you, you have to kind of know who you are. And I know that in certain parts, in certain systems, there's a lot of pressure to be one thing, right? And there's not a whole lot of space to figure out who you are. And so this is where we come back to this like human side of the process, and what we hope that you're experiencing when you start to hear more of these Initial View Tuesday talks, and when you start to see that there's opportunities for interviews and initial views in the process, is that we want you to experience some things on your side, but that at the end of the day, it has to teach you more about yourself, and you have to enjoy it in order for it to really come across, or for you to be able to talk about it or experience it as something that's like building you towards your future, right? So even in the chat, someone has mentioned that their love for computer science is kind of is disintegrating, or is not. Sorry, I didn't see which word you actually used, but that it's not as high as it used to be. And that means that that's good. That you're going through the process in your secondary school experience and your extracurricular activities and your intellectual curiosity to just understand kind of which direction. And that's what we're expecting you to do on our campuses. We're not expecting you to have it all figured out and have a perfectly scripted story and a perfectly quantified piece of your application in order to dictate who you're going to be on our campus. Because what the US education system in our universities is really about is letting you continue to unpack that. So I would just encourage you to know that the application and the extracurricular activities chart and all the things that you're doing, not just the chart itself, but the actual experiences that you're having outside the classroom, those are meant for you to just discover what's important to you, what's exciting to you, what's stimulating to you. And that can be a lot of different directions, right? And so when I'm reading a chart, I'm just asking, like, what direction is that student taking themselves? And where are these kind of, where I'm following along your path, right? And that is also articulated in other aspects of the application, like your essays and any additional information you're including in there, about how your teachers and counselors and professionals are talking about you, and then how you actually end up talking about yourself and those experiences in an initial view if you choose to do one. And so that's why I said, tell us something new in each component of your application, because it's letting us kind of follow along your path of how you're discovering yourself in your current setting, and then how you're going to continue to do that, because we don't expect it to be completely figured out. Even if you are one of those Angular students and know that you love computer science and you have a really high level expertise of research in it already, we know that we could surprise you with what we have waiting for you on our campuses and what direction that might take you. So hopefully that introduces the concepts you were talking about, Gloria.
Yeah. I will mention that, I am in my mid 40s and I am still, figuring out who I am. Like, it is a really hard question of like, who are you and what matters to you? Like, that's like lifelong, you should be asking yourself that question. But I think a good kind of way to talk about this is, and someone in the questions and chat had mentioned, like, what does kindness counts mean? And Solomon, I know this is your specific advice, but I think we get caught up in this, we get caught up in the what's of the application and even the spikes that people talk about and what you're so good at. But what we don't really is hard to talk about is like the character behind it. So you could be doing a part-time job flipping hamburgers, or you could be doing some research at some academic of science, Academy of Science. But what you're talking about in those experiences about character could actually be more important and similar. So, I mean, Solomon, can you kind of give a little color on what you mean about kindness counts? I think it goes with this community point as well.
Yeah, I think Shane mentioned community. We're looking to build communities on our campuses. And, I mean, to be frank, we don't want to deliver to our faculty jerks. We don't want to, we want students who are thoughtful and kind and care about each other, that will push each other to do wonderful things, that will work together and collaborate to reach higher levels. And I think that's where my word of advice of kindness counts comes in. I mean, I think that's something that often is underrated. We talk so much about or there's a lot of talk about the grades and about the testing and about, what do I have to do? And less about, these personal qualities, of kindness, concern for others, that's essentially what I meant by that. And so yeah, we're looking for students that have, a strong point of excellence, but we're also looking for students that take care of each other.
And I think that goes to, when people are asking, like, should I self-teach myself an AP class? Should I take both IELTS and TOEFL? Should I, like all these kind of questions, do those things showcase kindness? Do those things showcase community? It could if some of those intangibles, like you weren't able to show some of your grit, maybe then taking some extra classes or putting in some extra effort showed a little bit of grit, but maybe not as much as some of these other intangibles that we're talking about. So, I mean, there was a question about interviews, how important they are. Obviously, initial view is an interview. So I have to kind of ask that question. But how is an interview helpful? Why is it helpful? How does it showcase some of these things we're talking about?
So I work really closely with our alumni interview team here on campus, and obviously see a lot of initial view interviews coming through in my international work as well. So I'm happy to shed a little bit of light on that. I think this goes back to my earlier point of when we get your application, it's in our computer screen. When you are meeting an interviewer, it's a real live human being sitting on the other end from you. So I think that interviews can be invaluable in putting a face to the name. I think that sometimes interviews are a really wonderful opportunity to share something new and different about yourself. To Christy's point, I have absolutely read applications before where a student says, I love biology, I eat, sleep, breathe the lab, this is what I want to study. And then you see them in an interview or an initial view and they say, well, yeah, but I also have sort of this side interest in sustainable fashion design. And I'm like, amazing, like that's great. Like we are all schools that are looking for multifaceted, multidisciplinary students who are going to engage in a wide array of areas of campus. So I think that really using those opportunities to share what you care about and share what you are passionate about is important. I would also add that I always give students a piece of advice that interviews aren't just your opportunity. If you are doing like an alumni interview per se, aren't just the school's opportunity to get to know about you. It's also a good opportunity for you to get to know about the school. So I always encourage students to sort of put yourself in the driver's seat, go into those interviews with an idea of, if it's an initial view, an idea of what things you really hope to share, what things you really want to come across to the admissions officer, because we don't get to meet you in person a vast majority of the time. So just having that sort of human to human connection can make such a difference when we are reading that application file.
Wonderful. We have some questions about how do I know what key characteristics are important to your campus, and Shane, to your point, you earlier talked about like fit and values, and so like, do you have what would you recommend to students to figure out what those important pieces of your, I think you called it a community creed, right?
I did, yeah. And I think many schools out there have sort of a community creed or a way that they sort of go about sort of defining themselves. And that's really what a community creed is. It's, looking at ours, for example, I know our student government and faculty and staff all sort of worked on, like, if we were to define our community and sort of the values that we support, these are sort of the 6 things that we came up with of how we would define ourselves. So and we talk about that every year when we're getting ready to head out for recruitment, when we're getting ready to start our sort of reading and selection process. We revisit that and some of the sort of the values, the things that we find important in our institution. We look at our mission statements and things like that, because that is how we define ourselves as a university. And so when we approach applications and we're shaping our community, we are sort of looking at through that lens, because this is the type of community and culture that we have on our campus. And so we are trying to sort of look for those type of students that could contribute to that same culture and community that we really feel like could be a good fit. So as you are trying to figure out institutions that sort of match your values and that match sort of your fit, that can be one thing that you look at. I mean, there are a lot of other things out there on websites. You can contact students, you can tune into sessions. And a lot of times in our sessions too, we talk about some of these things that define our community and say, hey, is this resonating with me as a student? Are these sort of what I'm looking for in an institution? And I think if you start to identify with some of these things and you're like, yes, this is important to me, or this is what I'm looking for, then likely we're a pretty good match for you. And that's what we're going to be kind of looking for on our side as well. But it's not one of these things that's always sort of laid out there. I mean, all these intangibles that we talked about, yes, we gave you examples, but this is not everything as well. And I actually, mine on here was sort of the be authentic and tell your story piece. And I think this sort of ties into that a little bit. I mean, at the end of the day, we want you to be who you are. We want you to tell us your story the best that you can. Put it out there in the application. We recognize the challenge of putting yourself down on a piece of paper, but do your best to tell us that story, to let sort of your values and impact and who you are come through that application. And then as we're reviewing that, we'll be looking to sort of see if you sort of match and think about what would be sort of the right fit for our community.
And that just ties into the fact that, remember when I was mentioning the TOEFL and IELTS, it's just to make sure you're going to be successful on our campus. This fit component and who you demonstrate as yourself, as authentic in your application, we're trying to make sure you're going to be happy at our institutions. So believe it or not, we're not actually competing for you as students. So I'm not like kind of elbowing Allie out, trying to get you to come to Northwestern instead of Dartmouth, right? We're actually tasked with a pretty complex job that we try to do our best at. But if you're not authentic in the process, we might not understand who you are going to be on our campus, right? And so during the summers and the off seasons of application reading, we're listening to our deans of all of the colleges and schools about our academic highlights and new programs. We're listening to our students and the students that work in our office and the students across a wide variety of presence on our campus to just understand our institutions. Because we're trying to identify students that will have that fit as well as you trying to identify that. So it's a two-sided process, right? We're not just trying to determine whether you're supposed to, earn admission. We're trying to determine whether you're going to be happy and be successful and be an addition to the community that you'll succeed at. And so just keep that in mind, that it is a two-sided process. In that authenticity and that fit. And that's why back to the initial view piece, telling us something new in each of those components will give us more of an opportunity to understand who you are. So I always struggle when a student in their initial view or in their alumni interview kind of repeats everything that was in their application, but in more of a scripted manner. And it's the initial view is trying to be authentic. It's trying to dig in. You're with a live human, a live person, trying to get to know you a little bit better, trying to demonstrate your proficiency skills, but also to get at who you are and that authenticity. So make sure you follow that path that interviewer is leading you on. That's what the intentional piece of that interview training for the interview staff member is, whether it's an alumni or whether it's for initial view or others. And then the writing portion even is another opportunity for you to add. So if you're repeating the exact same thing that you wrote in your essay for the common application or coalition application, again, that's a little bit of a missed opportunity to add something new, add another layer of authenticity. So I just wanted to tie back to your previous question, Gloria.
Thank you. I wanted to throw out here something that is not on this list and is not, it wasn't on our puzzle piece, is this thing called institutional priorities. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because I'm seeing lots of questions like, do you prefer this or this? And I think people are kind of missing the point here of you're building a class, right? You're not actually like looking for the same exact type of person 100 times over. In fact, you really kind of want to build a community that's going to be diverse and such. So can you explain what institutional priorities means and how that might shift and change, and maybe talk a little bit about what I think most people might not know this term, but like shaping means, like at the end of kind of a review process. Anybody want to take a crack at a simple definition of institutional priorities?
I feel like I've talked a lot, so I was trying to wait. I'll take a quick top level on it and then let you guys continue. There's institutional priorities, which may mean a lot of different things. Like we have an athletics program that's pretty robust at Northwestern. So we have to make sure that we have some athletes in our class, right? And so we want to make sure that we're fitting that need. We have an amazing Dean School of Music. So we need to make sure we have some really talented musicians on our campus that fulfill the priorities of that successful program, right? But that doesn't mean that there's specific quotas or numbers or ways that you can fit that puzzle piece, right? Each piece is different. Each piece is different in a puzzle. We also have priorities to make sure that we're bringing the best and most talented and most intellectually curious students from all over the globe. So we, each of us, are privileged to have an institutional priority of bringing international students to our campus. But depending on each institution, they may have different kind of levels of those institutional priorities. Like it wouldn't make sense for someone that doesn't have a music school to recruit those, the students that are most focused on receiving an education in conservatory music, right? And so that's what we're talking about when we're talking about institutional priorities, is some of it is dictated from the larger needs of what we are designed as an institutional to provide, right? But otherwise, shaping can be a really fun but really challenging activity because it's different every single year. The number of applications and the students that are applying to our institutions are going to be different. So all of you as students, talking to like the big elephant in the room, have a different experience than students that applied 4 years ago, right? Because of huge international major challenges and the pandemic and international events that have happened. And so you're going to have a different lens, a different perspective than you're not expected to look the same every year. And that's what shaping a little bit is. But I'll let you guys dig into that piece a little bit more.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. That was perfect. There's a school about 25 minutes away from Duke that is University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. That is a public university in the state of North Carolina. And so one of their institutional priorities is to make sure that 80% of their incoming freshman class come from that state, because they have that commitment to educating students in the state of North Carolina. So that is an institutional priority. All of us here, have a commitment to diversity. And part of that commitment is also making sure that we have representation, not only from the United States, but also around the world. And so that's why, we're so happy, to be able to meet all of you and to be here today, because we want to make sure that, there is representation from around the world that will make our, classes diverse and that will create a community of that will allow people to learn from each other, to grow into stronger global citizens. And so that is another institutional priority that comes to mind.
And I think, Gloria, to the point that you made when you sort of introduced this question, institutional priorities can change on any given year. One year, the director of the orchestra might come to us and say, our bassoonist just graduated. We would love to find another bassoon player. Great. For that year, that might be an institutional priority. Dartmouth just opened the Irving Center for Energy and Society. We are really excited to find some students who are eager to study in that area. What I don't want to convey, though, is that you should in any way, shape, or form change who you are or the application that you are presenting based on what you think our institutional priorities are. Like, I think that's why we're all a little reticent to talk about it, because it is so sort of shrouded in mystery. We don't want you to read too much into that. That is not something that you can control. That is out of your hands. So you need to focus on this piece of being authentic and being yourself. And as Solomon introduced in the beginning, we are looking for, I love that term of well-lopsided students and well-rounded students to create this community. We are trying to pick students from all different sort of niches. So don't get too bogged down in this train of thought would be my advice.
And thank you for clarifying that. And that is exactly why I brought that up in the sense that I think there are some things that are out of your control. And what we hear every year is, like somebody mentioned an example of a student who wrote this amazing, funny essay. And then the following year, everybody's like, I need to write about that topic. And that's not, that is not what you should be doing. You should not be like, you want to get to know these schools because you want to know whether or not you want to apply there, but you don't want to contort yourself to try to fit into what you think they want to hear. Because if you do that, then you're not being true to yourself, but also you're not going to meet every school's need at that point. That's completely out of your control. So that, thank you for clarifying that. And that is what I wanted to highlight. There are some questions about demonstrated interest. We don't have a ton of time, but does anybody want to kind of put in there like how that plays into your review process at all?
I can just chime in quickly about sort of what demonstrated interest is, and there's lots of different ways in which you can show it. But first of all, I will tell you, any school that looks at demonstrated interest in the process will be very clear about that on their websites, on their communication to you. So you sort of know that that's something they look at. But you could be showing that in a lot of different ways. That could be how you engage with them virtually. If you were to come to campus, if you were to, if a rep was to come to your school or in your area, there are different ways in which you can sort of show that interest. But I think there's sort of this maybe myth behind like the more demonstrated interest I show, the more likely I am to get into that institution. And really, I think any institution that's looking at demonstrated interest is really looking for authentic demonstrated interest as you do it. So I would sort of think about that more so quality over sort of quantity there. Also, I know a lot of institutions that look at that, it's usually something that's kind of looked at the very end. They're still doing sort of this holistic process. But it may be one of those things at the very end, if they had, a group of students who all sort of looked really, really compelling in their process, that's where I think sometimes that demonstrated interest could come in at the sort of the very end there. So it's definitely something that could be looked at. And again, institutions that look at demonstrated interest are usually very clear about that in their process.
Fantastic. What a great way to end. The time has just blown by, and I kind of can't believe that the hour went by already, and there's still so much stuff that people want to question. Please come back to our Tuesday talks. This is what we talk about every week. And some weeks we're going to keep it high level, and some weeks we're going to go into the nitty gritty of kind of like how to think about your essay and how to think about your activities list. But yes, very much we are talking about being authentic. And that is what we hope that you got out of this session. We hope that you really kind of think through, I don't need to be like the person next to me. I don't need to like do things just to do them, but I should be doing things because I want to better myself and I want to get to know myself and things like that. So I hope that you found this helpful. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. Next week, we're going to be talking to some liberal arts colleges and their recent alumni. So you're going to get to ask recent grads some advice on the process. There are some people who have asked questions about initial view. I've got colleagues that are going to hang on here to answer some questions about initial view specifically. So if you're still like, I don't know about the interview and I don't even know what initial view is, feel free to stay here. I'm going to let my colleagues go. Thank you so much, Ali, Solomon, Shane, and Christy for joining me. It's been a real pleasure and we look forward to seeing you next week. And do not forget to send us your screenshots to contact@initialview.com. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a good night or good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. Bye.